How are you today? Actually, it's evening here, and I just came in from a long walk out in the driving rain and wind. I don't know if you can hear the rain outside my window, but it's coming down like cats and dogs. Kind of reminiscent of England, and or maybe elsewhere in the British Isles, where it just rains and rains and rains. In Canada, we have Vancouver. But I'm not in England. I'm not on some British estate that would appear on Downton Abbey or some estate of a villain out of a James Bond movie. Speaking of James Bond, that's how I spent my weekend. Not as James Bond, but watching all these old James Bond movies. George Lazenby in 1968-69 was just after Sean Connery and before Roger Moore. So I watched a bunch of old Connery movies, and then after that Lazenby, and then there's Roger Moore, who was quite campish, but somehow I kind of got a good laugh out of him. And then there is Pierce Brosnan, who's just a little too sweet and pretty for the role. And finally, we got Daniel Craig. So, I'm not Bond. I do have a Barber jacket that Daniel Craig wore in Skyfall, in one of the closing scenes where he does battle some bad guys. Him and M hold up in his old house. But although I'm not Bond, I can share in the experience, because there is a single malt identified with Bond that appears not in the books by Ian Fleming, but in two movies, Die Another Day and The World Is Not Enough. Die Another Day is also notable for an appearance by Halle Berry on a beach in Cuba. But that is an aside. But do note that if you ever get a chance to see the film. Talisker appears in Die Another Day about 49 minutes into the film. A bottle of Talisker is seen in M's room. M, you'll recall, is portrayed by Judi Dench, somebody who probably I wouldn't want to report to in real life. But I do have a bottle of Talisker, and that is the subject of today's review. But it's not Talisker 10 years, which is famous. It's Talisker Storm. And Talisker Storm doesn't actually appear in the James Bond film, but I thought it was a good segue into this video review. Talisker Storm was launched in 2013 by the parent company that owns this fantastic brand, Diageo. And Storm, the premise behind it is that it is basically Talisker 10 on steroids. Actually, they don't use the word steroids. They use nice, lofty marketing terminology. They write here on the top of the packaging, an intense Talisker with a profoundly maritime character, like a warm welcome from a wild Hebridean sea. Well, I don't know about that. We're going to find out. And in order to find out, I've got my Glencairn glass. I've got a measuring instrument, a nice glass of water, which we'll use later to try this malt diluted, and a spoon. So first we're going to taste this whiskey undiluted, no water. And speaking of undiluted, the alcohol by volume for this whiskey is quite high, 45.8%. I find when you go over, well, now I was supposed to measure that out. Now the reason I had this is because I wanted to demonstrate to you the importance. Actually, I poured myself a double, exactly a double, amazingly. But the purpose of having a little measuring instrument when you drink your whiskey is, I find it's good to pour out, measure what you have, then take that bottle and put it away. Because if you leave it out while you imbibe, before you know it, you probably have a little too much, which can defeat the purpose of drinking whiskey if you really want to appreciate the aesthetic, the taste of it, which I hope is really why you're drinking it, okay? And if you're drinking it for other reasons, maybe you might want to re-examine that, but I won't lecture you. Okay, so we have a double measure. And now we're going to nose this. I detect sweet teas, ocean brine, certainly the salt air, black earth, I'm thinking loam, peat, a little bit of ash and soot. It's very earthy. It's not tarry and smoky like an Islay malt. Now, Talisker comes from the Isle of Skye. That's where the distillery is located, so it's not an Islay malt by any means. But I find that whiskies produced on the Isle of Skye and Islay share a lot in common. There's peat, smoke, brine, salt are key elements in the flavor profile. So they kind of share a similar ancestry or flavor DNA, if you wish. You want to take a little sip. This is powerful. When you take your sip, it's smooth initially, but quickly the flavors really start to explode, and it's very warming, and unlike Judi Dench's character M in Bond, more warming like the embrace of maybe Halle Berry before she beats you up. And what I'm tasting are thick chunks of salt, coarse kosher salt, peppercorns, and there's some sherry in there too. Talisker Storm has no age statement, and I'm unconcerned with that. It's all about the taste. Talisker 10 has an age statement of 10 years, meaning there's no whiskey in Talisker 10 that is less than 10 years old. There can be in excess of 10 years, but a minimum of 10. With Talisker Storm, there could be some 8-year-old whiskey casks blended into this single malt. And it doesn't taste young. It tastes good, refined, well produced. The finish is drying, lemon, lime, peppery, a lot of maritime flavors going on. I like this. And it is, in a sense, Talisker 10, but punched up a level in terms of smoke, peppercorn, and salt. And it works. Sometimes Diageo and other multinational drinks companies, when they release expressions in a certain product line with the intention that they are going to be the new and improved or boosted up version of a classic, they fail. And I think Johnny Walker Black Label is a classic. And I think Johnny Walker Double Black is not a classic, but it tries to operate or market itself on the premise that it's Black Label but punched up a level. And I think it fails. Double Black is pleasant, overpriced, but pleasant, but it is not Black Label on steroids or to the power of 10. Talisker Storm, though, is Talisker 10 punched up a level, and they do it successfully. You also see this habit of taking a successful product line and boosting it up a bit with distillers editions. You'll have like Oban Distillers Edition, Dalwhinnie will come out with a DE. There'll be a number of products that, and I'm picking on Diageo, but Edrington, Beam Global, which just got bought out by Suntory, they all release distillers editions with the idea or the subtle marketing that this is better than the classic. And generally they're not better, they're just different and actually not as preferable to the classic. But you've got a successful brand and you want to make as many extensions to that brand to be profitable. And making a profit's not a dirty word. At least not in my vocabulary. This is good. Now we're going to try it with a bit of water. The key with water is not too much. So I got a teaspoon. Within the teaspoon, I probably got half a teaspoon of water. Obviously, adding water is going to take the intensity down a bit. But by adding water with Talisker Storm, it's a bit more malty. The smokiness takes on a different character. And I really think it's just something you're going to have to experiment. Which do you prefer? For me, it would depend on my mood. But water does work with this. And probably if you talk to the master distiller who came up with this great whiskey, he or she would recommend you add water too. Because I mean, it's at 45.8%. That's quite a bit. Now, although that's quite a high ABV, there is no burn, there is no raw alcohol. This is well put together, very balanced whiskey. I may not have a Range Rover Sport HSE. I may not have an Aston Martin or an exciting job in espionage with MI5, with bad villains with monocles and beautiful women chasing me. But what I do have is a slice of Bond's life here with a bit of Talisker. And it's inspiring me to say, Bond, James Bond, give us a kiss, Moneypenny. It's good. Talisker 10, highly recommended. Give it a whirl. I paid about $55 in Texas, and I think Bond would be happy with it too. Cheers.